Somewhere underneath the 1.3 billion tons of water behind me is a 180-year-old underwater city.
Scientists have finally found it. Hundreds of feet below the surface of the Black Sea, a fully intact city has been sitting in the dark, preserved in a world without oxygen. This discovery is beyond stunning. It's terrifying. It proves that a massive biblical-scale flood is not a myth. The team found structures and even a shipwreck, but what they uncovered about the speed of the flood is the real story. This event didn't just drown a city, it launched a human migration that changed the world forever. The deep sea time capsule. When a man like that turns his attention away from steel warships and toward ancient human history, you know he's onto something big. In the late 1990s, Ballard became obsessed with a radical, controversial theory. A theory that connected a single catastrophic geologic event to the oldest and most widespread legend in all of human civilization, the story of a great flood. Many people were crazy about this idea, but most serious scientists thought it was a fantasy. Ballard decided to prove them wrong. His target was a place unlike any other on Earth, the Black Sea. The thing nobody tells you about the Black Sea is that it's a terrifying and unique body of water. On the surface, it looks normal, but if you go down below about 500 feet, everything changes. The water becomes completely anoxic. That's a scientific term meaning it has zero oxygen. None. Instead, it's choked with a toxic brew of hydrogen sulfide. It's a dead zone. This chemical cocktail means nothing can live there. No fish, no plants, and most importantly, no bacteria or wood-boring organisms that would normally devour a shipwreck. Anything that sinks into this dark, poisonous layer is essentially mummified. It's pickled in place, safe from the ravages of time. It is, for an explorer like Ballard, the world's largest museum, one where all the exhibits are perfectly preserved in the dark. In the year 2000, Ballard led an expedition on the research vessel Northern Horizon. He wasn't just using sonar, he was bringing his high-tech robotic arsenal. His main tool was Hercules, a remote-operated vehicle, or ROV, equipped with high-definition cameras and delicate robotic arms. It was a multi-million-dollar machine designed to be Ballard's eyes and hands in a place no human could ever go. The team's goal was to scan a very specific part of the seabed, about 12 miles off the coast of Turkey, in an area where geologists believed an ancient shoreline might be. For days, the sonar sled mapped the seafloor, sending back images of nothing, just endless rolling hills of mud. It was painstaking work. Then an anomaly appeared on the screen. It was a shape about 310 feet down. It wasn't a random pile of rocks, it was angular. It had straight lines. The mood on the ship changed instantly. This was it. Ballard and his team deployed Hercules. The robot, tethered to the ship by a fiber optic cable, began its long, slow descent. For over an hour, it dropped through the blackness. Then its powerful lights switched on, cutting through a void that had not seen light in over 7,000 years. The pilots, flying the robot with joysticks, navigated toward the sonar target. And then, it emerged from the silt. The team stared at their monitors, speechless. It was a building, or at least what was left of one. They could clearly see a rectangular structure roughly 39 feet long and 13 feet wide. It was a jumble of collapsed wooden beams, all preserved to an impossible degree. The wood still had chisel marks on it. They saw a sticky mixture of clay and reeds, a classic ancient building technique known as wattle and daub. This was not a shipwreck, this was a house. Hercules glided over the site. Its cameras spotted work stone tools, pieces of polished stone, and ceramic fragments scattered in the mud. This was a human settlement, a Stone Age village, sitting on what was clearly an ancient dry beach, and it was now under more than 300 feet of salt water. Ballard had his smoking gun. He had found definitive proof that thousands of years ago, this spot was dry land. People had lived here, worked here, and built homes here. And then something terrible happened. Something so fast and so violent that it submerged their entire world. As if that wasn't enough, Ballard's team made another discovery on that same trip, a few miles away. This time it was a shipwreck. But it was a Byzantine wreck dated to around the 5th century AD, and it was, in a word, perfect. The ship was sitting upright on the seabed, its mast was still standing. The cargo of giant clay jars called amphorae was still neatly stacked in the hold. Even the wooden rigging and ropes, things that would rot away in a matter of years in the regular ocean, were draped over the deck as if the ship had sunk yesterday, not 1,500 years ago. This Sinop D shipwreck, as it was named, was the ultimate proof of concept. It showed just how powerful the Black Sea's preservation was. Ballard realized that if a 1,500-year-old ship looked this good, a 7,000-year-old village would be just as pristine. He had found a drowned world. But this discovery wasn't just a lucky find. Ballard was looking for it. Why? The flood that forged history. To understand why Ballard was hunting for a Stone Age house 300 feet underwater, we have to go back a few years before his expedition to two geologists at Columbia University, William Ryan and Walter Pittman. These men weren't archaeologists. They were mudmen. Their job was to study sediment cores, long tubes of mud drilled from the deep ocean floor. And the cores they pulled from the Black Sea told a story more dramatic and terrifying than any Hollywood blockbuster. You see, the data just didn't make sense. The top layer of mud in the cores was a dark ooze, filled with the microscopic shells of saltwater organisms, the kind you'd find in any ocean. But the layer directly beneath that was completely different. It was a layer of hard, dry, cracked freshwater mud. It was packed with the shells of extinct freshwater snails. And the line between them wasn't a slow, gentle blend. It wasn't a gradual transition over thousands of years. It was a single, sharp, violent line. It was, as they called it, a flood surface. Ryan and Pittman spent years trying to figure out what this meant. They gathered data on submerged river canyons, ancient shorelines, and carbon-dated the snail shells. Finally, they pieced together a stunning and terrifying theory. It's called the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. Here's the picture they painted. During the last ice age, which peaked around 20,000 years ago, so much of the world's water was locked up in massive glaciers that the global sea level was hundreds of feet lower than it is today. The Black Sea in this ancient world wasn't a sea at all. It was a giant, isolated freshwater lake. Think of it as a separate, smaller version of one of the Great Lakes. And because the Mediterranean Sea next door was also so low, this Black Sea lake sat in a deep geologic bowl. Its surface was almost 400 feet below the level of the Mediterranean. For thousands of years, this basin was a paradise. Surrounded by fertile river deltas, it was the perfect place for the first Neolithic farmers to settle. They had endless fresh water for their crops, lush pastures for their animals, and a stable, protected climate. Many people are crazy about the idea that this was the original Garden of Eden, a perfect cradle of civilization where humanity first learned to build and farm. But then the Ice Age ended. The great ice sheets melted and the oceans began to rise. Year after year, decade after decade, the Mediterranean Sea crept higher. It filled the Aegean Basin. It pushed its way up through the Dardanelles Strait. All that stood between this rising, angry ocean and the low-lying freshwater lake was a single thin strip of land. A natural dam of rock and earth at what we now call the Bosphorus Strait, the channel that runs through modern-day Istanbul. Ryan and Pittman calculated that around 7,600 years ago, or 5,600 BC, the rising Mediterranean finally reached the top of that dam. The pressure became too much. The rock and earth gave way, and the ocean broke through. What happened next is almost impossible to imagine. This wasn't a leak. This wasn't a gentle spill. This was a cataclysm. Ryan and Pittman calculated that the water that poured through the breach was 200 times the flow of Niagara Falls. Let that sink in. Not twice the flow, 200 times. It was a saltwater waterfall, miles wide, thundering down a 400-foot drop into the freshwater lake. The roar must have been deafening, a sound that could be heard for 100 miles in every direction. This is the wow factor that changes everything. The water level in the Black Sea Basin didn't just rise, it exploded. The theory suggests the lake level rose 6 inches every single day. Imagine you are a farmer living in one of these peaceful villages on the lakeshore. One day you hear a terrifying, thunderous noise from the south, a noise that never ever stops. The next morning, the beach is gone. The water is closer. You move your belongings to higher ground. The next day, the water has crept past your ankles. The day after that, your house is flooding. This isn't a flood you can wait out. It's an unstoppable, advancing ocean. You can't just move to the next hill. You have to run and never stop running. Ryan and Pittman's data showed that within a year, an area the size of the state of Florida was swallowed by the sea. The freshwater lake, a paradise for humanity, was flipped into a toxic saltwater sea in a matter of months. Every village, every farm, every grave, and every memory on that ancient shoreline was lost, buried under hundreds of feet of salt water. This was the insane, unbelievable theory that Ballard was testing. And the house he found, 310 feet down, was one of those lost villages. It was the physical proof. It was the smoking gun that proved the geologist's data was real. The discovery confirmed that a civilization-ending flood wasn't a myth. It had actually happened. But this kind of discovery isn't unique. It's just the fastest example. Scientists have found other drowned worlds, and they are just as stunning. Evidence under the waves. The Black Sea discovery is mind-blowing because of its speed, but the idea of finding lost cities underwater isn't science fiction. It's a reality. To really wrap your head around the Black Sea catastrophe, you have to look at another submerged village, this one in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Israel. It's called Atlit Yam, and what they found there proves just how advanced these so-called Stone Age people really were. Atlit Yam was discovered in 1984 by a marine archaeologist, and it's even older than the Black Sea flood. Radiocarbon dating shows it was a thriving community around 6,900 BC. That's nearly 9,000 years ago. Today it sits under 25 to 40 feet of water about a quarter mile off the modern coast. When archaeologists began excavating, they were stunned. This wasn't a simple fishing camp. This was a massive, permanent Neolithic settlement, one of the largest and best preserved in the world. They found the foundations of large rectangular structures built with stone. These were permanent houses. They found paved areas, courtyards, and fireplaces still full of charcoal. But the most incredible discovery was a well. These villagers had dug a well, almost 18 feet deep, through solid clay and sandstone. It was lined with stone courses, just like a modern well. This is a mind-blowing piece of engineering for people from 9,000 years ago. And here's the kicker. It was built on dry land. Its existence is the ultimate smoking gun that the sea level was once much, much lower. Inside the well, excavators found a treasure trove of artifacts, perfectly preserved. Animal bones, stone tools, and waterlogged, uncarbonized plant remains. This village was a complex, thriving society. The people survived on an agro-pastoral marine subsistence. That's a fancy way of saying they did it all. They grew wheat, barley, and lentils. They raised domesticated animals like goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle. They also hunted wild animals, and of course they fished from the sea. They were sophisticated. Archaeologists found over 8,000 flint artifacts, including arrowheads, sickle blades for harvesting their grain, and knives. What's amazing is that this flint came from Mount Carmel, over 10 miles away. This means they had trade routes and were traveling. But then archaeologists found the inhabitants themselves. Close to or within the houses, they discovered 15 human skeletons. These weren't scattered bones, these were intentional graves. This was a community that honored its departed. One grave held a woman and a child buried together. What many overlooked is that these skeletons told a grim story. Many of them showed signs of hypoplasia, a condition where tooth enamel is thin, a clear sign of malnutrition or disease during childhood. Life was tough. So what happened to Atlit Yam? The evidence here suggests a slow abandonment. As the Ice Age glaciers melted, the Mediterranean rose, inch by inch, year by year. The villagers at Atlit Yam likely watched the sea creep closer and closer, season after season. The rising salt water would have eventually contaminated their precious freshwater well, making life impossible. They had no choice but to pack up and leave their homes to be swallowed by the sea. Atlit Yam is the perfect parallel. It is the hard, physical proof that entire complex Neolithic cities were submerged by the rising seas after the Ice Age. It proves these Stone Age people were capable of building the exact kind of structures Ballard found in the Black Sea. And it's not the only one. Off the coast of Greece lies Pavlopetri, a city from the Bronze Age, the time of legends like the Trojan War. It's considered the oldest fully submerged city in the world. It has streets, two-story houses, and tombs, all mapped out under about 15 feet of water. In Egypt, the legendary city of Heracleion, which was visited by Helen of Troy according to myths, was thought to be a fantasy. Then, in 2000, it was found, completely submerged in the Nile Delta, its giant statues of pharaohs and gods lying flat in the mud. These discoveries prove that our ancestors were constantly in a battle with the rising water. Now take the story of Atlit Yam or Pavlopetri and put it on hyperspeed. Imagine instead of decades or centuries, the sea rose in months. Imagine instead of a slow, sad migration, it was a terrifying, panicked stampede. That is the difference between those sites and the Black Sea. One was a slow tragedy. The other was an apocalypse. But the flood didn't just end a civilization, it may have created one. The Atlantis Connection. The consequences of the Black Sea deluge are, frankly, hard to overstate. This wasn't just a regional disaster, it was a world-changing event. The thing nobody tells you about this flood is that it wasn't just an end, it was also a beginning. It may be the single event that kicked off the dawn of modern civilization in Europe. Think about the people who lived in this fertile basin. As we said, Ryan and Pittman argued that this protected freshwater paradise was the cradle of the Neolithic Revolution. These were some of the world's first and most advanced farmers. They had perfect soil, abundant fresh water, and a stable climate. They had it all. And then, in a matter of months, it was gone. A 6-inch rise in water every single day. This is a speed you can watch. It's a relentless, terrifying advance. The historian Norman Naimark described it as a desperate, terrifying exodus. These people, tens of thousands of them, had to flee. They grabbed what they could and ran from the thundering water. They scattered in all directions. Some fled east into Asia, some fled south toward Mesopotamia and Egypt, and many fled west, up the river valleys of the Danube and the Dnieper, deep into the heart of Europe. And here is the biggest wow factor of all: the timing. Scientists have been scratching their heads for decades about something called the Neolithic explosion. For thousands of years, Europe was populated only by small nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. But then, starting right around 5500 BC, something changes. Suddenly, all at once, farming appears. All across Europe, from Greece to Germany, we see the sudden arrival of wheat, barley, domesticated cattle, sheep, and pigs. We see new styles of pottery. We see the very same kind of rectangular wattle and daub houses that Ballard found at the bottom of the Black Sea. This new package of technology appears almost overnight and spreads across the continent like wildfire. For years, scientists debated, did the hunter-gatherers just learn how to farm, or were they replaced? The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis provides the answer. It wasn't an idea that spread. It was a people that spread. The flood provided the motive. A massive, skilled, and traumatized population of farmers was suddenly made homeless. They surged into Europe, bringing their advanced technology, their seeds, and their animals with them. They weren't just migrants. They were, in effect, technological refugees. They didn't just join the hunter-gatherer societies, they outcompeted them and replaced them. They brought the Neolithic Revolution with them. To put it mildly, this theory suggests that this one flood event is the reason Europe became a farming continent. It's the event that laid the groundwork for all of Western civilization. This is the mainstream, if controversial, theory. But now we have to talk about the wild theories, the ones that tap into even deeper mysteries. First, there's the Atlantis connection. Many people are crazy about this one. We all know the story of Atlantis from the Greek philosopher Plato. He described a great advanced civilization that was destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune when it was swallowed by the sea. Historians usually assume he was talking about an island in the Atlantic or a volcano that blew up in the Mediterranean. But what if Plato's story was a garbled memory of the Black Sea deluge? The Bosphorus Strait, the channel that burst open, was known to the ancient Greeks as the Pillars of Hercules. Plato said Atlantis was beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The Black Sea is beyond those pillars. Plato described Atlantis as a fertile plain. The Black Sea Basin was a fertile plain. He said it was destroyed by a flood. The Black Sea Basin was destroyed by a flood. Could this cradle of civilization have been the real Atlantis, its story passed down for thousands of years until Plato finally wrote it down? Then there's the lost technology theory. This one is even wilder. We know from Atlet Yam that these Neolithic people were smart. They built stone wells and had trade routes. The anoxic water of the Black Sea, as Ballard proved, preserves everything. We're talking wood, leather, rope, clothing, even human tissue. Ballard found one small house. What else is down there? These farmers lived on the shore of a giant lake. They must have had boats. What if we find an entire perfectly preserved Neolithic boat? What if we find things that shatter our understanding of the Stone Age? Some speculate that this lost civilization was far more advanced than we credit them for, and the flood was a giant reset button on human history, plunging us back into a darker age. Finally, there's the global chain reaction theory. What if the Black Sea deluge wasn't just a regional event? Imagine the weight of 40,000 cubic miles of water suddenly shifting from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. Could that sudden massive transfer of weight have been enough to affect the Earth's tectonic plates? Could it have triggered a chain reaction of earthquakes and tsunamis all across the Mediterranean? This would have been felt globally, a domino effect of disasters. This would explain why so many cultures, not just in the Middle East, have a flood myth. The Black Sea's biblical echo. This is where the story takes a sharp turn, from hard science to one of the most enduring legends in human history, the story of Noah's flood. Now, we have to be absolutely clear. Ryan, Pittman, and Ballard are not saying that the entire globe was covered in water. They are not saying one man built a giant wooden boat and saved two of every animal. But what they are suggesting is something in a way even more profound. They are suggesting that the legend of Noah isn't just a story, it's a memory. A faded, distorted, but real memory of a catastrophic event that was seared into the minds of its survivors. You see, the flood story isn't unique to the Bible. It's much older. The oldest version we have is the Sumerian story of Zusudra from ancient Mesopotamia. A later and more famous version is in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh. This story, which is centuries older than the biblical story of Noah, tells of a man named Utnapishtim. He is warned by a god that the other gods are angry and plan to destroy the world with a flood. Utnapishtim is told to build a great boat, seal it with pitch, and save himself, his family, and the seed of all living things. The storm rages for 6 days and 6 nights, and when it's over, Utnapishtim's boat lands on a mountain just like Noah's. For a long time, historians assumed these myths were just cautionary tales. They figured they were just exaggerated stories about the annual, messy, but very normal floods of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. But a normal river flood doesn't end the world. It doesn't inspire a myth that lasts for 5,000 years. The Black Sea Deluge, however, does. Think about those Neolithic farmers fleeing the rising waters. Those who fled south over the mountains would have ended up in Mesopotamia, and they would have brought with them an absolutely terrifying story. A story of how their entire world, everything they had ever known, was swallowed by a violent, angry sea that came from nowhere. A sea that advanced day after day, unstoppably, until their homeland was gone forever. Over generations, this real memory would have been retold around campfires. It would have been exaggerated, as all great stories are. The regional flood that swallowed a giant valley became a global flood that swallowed the world. The thousands of farmers who escaped in their small fishing boats became a single chosen hero, Utnapishtim, who built a great ark. This legend, this kernel of historical truth, was so powerful that it became a central part of Mesopotamian mythology. Centuries later, this story was adapted by the ancient Hebrews during their time in Babylon. The story of Utnapishtim was retold and reframed. It became the story of Noah, a righteous man chosen by God to survive a flood sent to cleanse the world of wickedness. And it's not just the Middle East. Why are humans obsessed with a great flood? The ancient Greeks had the myth of Deucalion and Pyrrha. Hindu mythology has the story of Manu, who is warned of a great flood by a fish. And strangely, flood myths are found in cultures all over the world, from China to South America, even in Native American tribes who had zero contact with the Middle East. Could the Black Sea Deluge, as suggested by the chain reaction theory, have been the one event that traumatized the entire human race, the single memory that every culture shares? So is this all true? Did this all happen overnight? This is where we have to talk directly to you, the viewer. Many people are wondering, is this case closed? The thing is, science is still debating it. This is not a settled fact. Many geologists and archaeologists are critical of the Ryan-Pittman hypothesis. Some argue the flood was not a sudden catastrophic event. They believe the connection to the Mediterranean was much slower, that the water levels rose over centuries or even thousands of years. They point to data that suggests the water was not a single violent rush, but a more gradual spillover. If it was a slow flood, it's not the Noah's flood event the theory claims, it's just normal sea level rise. But what many overlook is Ballard's discovery. That wattle and daub house, that perfectly preserved settlement. It's really hard to explain that with a slow flood. A slow-moving flood would have allowed for decay. It would have allowed for waves and currents to erode the shore, scattering the tools and beams. They found a city. What if the Ark is next? Do you believe this was the real Noah's flood or just a geologic event? Let us know below and don't forget to like and subscribe.